I'm talking to Robbie Wilson at the Tavern at the Heathman Hotel in Portland. We talk crafting bottled cocktails and using science to create new and interesting flavors, along with the responsibility of bartenders to the industry and the ability to affect change. Yeah, so I made you a Between the Sheets. It's one of my favorite cocktails. I've been trying to bring it back. It is, it's a strange one because it's just it's what we do every day nowadays. It's just modify a classic and do it. And it was the story I know is Harry, who created the sidecar, 10 years later created Between the Sheets for a regular who wanted something different than the sidecars he normally ordered. It's like, great. Like, that's
really
exactly
didn't reinvent
what we
the
do.
wheel too much there, but at the same time, it worked.
Yeah, works really well.
I just love it because it mixes 2 out of 3 of my absolute favorite spirits right now, which is rum and cognac.
Yeah. And I think cognac is in a really special place because it's got, and rum, I guess, to the same extent. There are so many twin base cocktails in those, and those are not really done. Like, if you were creating a cocktail from scratch, you probably wouldn't go twin base.
Maybe. I think we're definitely getting into a place now where split bases is something you think about. It's part of our weapons. It's part of what we have. At least that's what I think. Now we're also getting to a place where the culinary world has stepped into cocktails so much so that we're not just thinking, oh, what base am I going to use? It's more, what flavors am I going to use? And so what does this spirit lend? What does this spirit lend? What does this liqueur lend? And we're building off of that as opposed to just, we understand the basics, right, as a foundational building blocks, but we're also looking at those basics going, I think these work for more than just X plus Y plus Z equals magic. Mm-hmm. We're looking at them going, well, yeah, whiskey or cognac, it's aged. So we have all these base notes of vanillins and woody notes and whatnot. And then you have like citrus, which is your fruit notes. And then maybe you have a liqueur, that's your floral notes. So now we're building perfume, basically, right? But just from a different perspective. And then you're going into flavor, and the same idea can be said for flavor. You can have these different foundational ideas. And classic cocktails, at least from my own research, we're getting to a place where those just magically work in all of those. They work from a culinary perspective, they work from a perfume perspective, and they work from a cocktail science perspective.
Yeah, I think I like the way you put it as the flavor side, because I think we all do that. Maybe we don't think about it in that way. We're just like, I want chocolate. I know that this bitter can bring that. Chocolate itself could bring that. Or maybe this Amaro has a chocolatey note that I remember, this sweet vermouth or what have you. I get really excited about cocktails where one spirit or the spirits matter, meaning that you can't just use a category.
Yeah.
You can't just say, okay, this is a rum cocktail, use whatever white rum you want, or use whatever cognac you want, or whatever whiskey. That it's like, it's a great cocktail with Ardbeg, but it's a good cocktail with Laphroaig, and yet if you designed a different cocktail, Laphroaig would be great and Ardbeg would be good.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting when you can really dial it in to a specific spirit, or in your definition, specific flavor profile that adds to it, makes it work, and nothing else will work in its stead.
One of the greatest books I've read in the last 2 years is a cooking book called The Flavor Matrix. And more conceptually, what it is it's a collaboration between Watson, the super AI, that is, I believe, IBM's, and a celebrity chef, I forget his name, down in California. So what they were doing is they were feeding, create a recipe, Watson, and Watson would throw out this recipe. And they looked at it and they're like, ha ha ha, see, this AI doesn't understand this. This recipe doesn't work. So the chef looked at them and said, fuck it, I'll try it. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
And they all magically worked. And so the scientists started looking into deeper what it was. And the way that Watson could understand our world of flavor was through phenols, specific chemical components that we have categorized. And alcohol is 90% phenols, right? That's what makes up almost everything, are these tiny little things that have infused themselves via time, exposure, whatever, into this solution that we call alcohol. And we do this in various different ways based on cultural whatever. And so this, in collaboration, this chef and Watson created all these recipes that were based on if it smells. So the example that I always use is Watson created a chicken burger with strawberry ketchup. Ketchup is categorized as anything that is a puree of sugar, salt, and vinegar. The reason why Watson did that is that the same phenol that's in strawberry exists in chicken in high amounts. And so that's how Watson interpreted the world. If it had high traces of the same phenols, it put them together.
That's interesting.
So in that sense, I like to look at spirits and liqueurs and everything and go, well, maybe we're looking at this. We as humans have looked at it this way because we base so much of our perception on what we ingest on taste. But if you look at taste from a neurological point of view, we only taste 6 things. And they're really big textural things: sour, bitter, salty, umami. Like these things, we feel it with our tongue, which all senses are based on feel. Mm-hmm. Your eyes see because we feel the photons hit that, and that transcribes the message to our brain. But smell, there's so much more. There's so many more different individual phenols that maybe we need to start looking at our cocktails from the phenol perspective. And so I did an experiment where I took pear brandy and I infused it with rosemary in oil. And you could barely taste the rosemary in the oil via the cocktail. But then when I put a certain perfume on the stem and that infected your finger and then you smelled your finger, it changed the way you perceived the taste, and all of a sudden the rosemary started hitting you again. And so I think that, like, when you start thinking of spirits in their flavors or their phenols, you start recognizing that each individual spirit is special for what it is, not as just a category. And then you start looking at categories differently and going, well, wait a second, who's the innovator? Yeah. Who's the cool person with a really amazing story who's doing something different and it's creating this phenol as opposed to this phenol? And who am I showing off and really like saying this person's doing an amazing job as opposed to whom and what am I covering up?
Yeah. It's that's funny because in cognac production we do everything by smell,
right? Because
they have to. Every grape is going to be different from the terroir that season, the field it's in, everything. So we can only look to history to sort of help us dictate what we think might happen this coming harvest, this season. But then it comes down to once it's harvested, once it's pressed into wine, once it's fermented or pressed into juice, fermented into wine, how is it going to distill? Mm-hmm. At what point do we make our cuts between our heads and tails? Because all those flavors, there's so many that, like the floral note pops up real early pops up really late. So if you cut too early, mm-hmm. you might not get as much floral. If you cut too early on the heads, you get a lot of fruit that might over-dominate everything else. Or if you cut too late, like a couple seconds too late, and you might miss a lot of the big fruit notes. So it's a really interesting standpoint to be from the cocktail side. I'm really mad that I didn't come up with this because I was trying to come up with a cocktail with like other high-end ingredients because I was using XO in it. Mm-hmm. And so immediately I went to truffle. I love truffle, everything like that. But truffle needs oil to taste it. We need the fat to translate the flavor on our palate. And so I was playing around with different things, and I was just like, it wasn't working. It's like a lot of truffles going into a bottle of XO, and you can't really taste it.
Spoken like the Hennessy rep.
Yeah. And then I went to a bar in, it was Monarch in Dallas, and they took XO and put it on a giant cube, and on top of the cube, which was above the wash line for the spirit, just one shaving of white truffle. Mm-hmm. Like the smallest little, like pinky nail shaving. And it was the greatest cocktail because you could smell the truffle because white truffle is so aromatic, but then it wasn't, if you'd put it in the drink, wouldn't have tasted it or barely tasted it.
Or it would have messed with how you taste it, when you taste it, because you needed it to modify your senses. I speak like this, so just bear with me. But you needed that modification to code your senses in a new way, to then interpret the cocktail correctly, quote unquote.
Yeah, no, completely. And it was, I was mad because it was so simple.
Yeah.
I was going so complex.
Yep.
And they so simply just went, what about if we do this? Mind blown. Nailed it.
I mean, it goes back into like creativity, right? In the sense of like, you always need to hire or have on your team both perspectives. You need to have the ultra nerd, someone who will just think about this thing so much. And then you need to hire the laziest person you could ever find, because no matter what, they're going to find a shortcut to get to it.
Yeah.
And chances are the only way they're going to get to that shortcut is because the nerd just went deep diving to a point where the guy's like, wait, or gal or whatever is just going, wait, really? That's all? You're doing all this just to get to this? Let's just do this.
Yeah.
And then you get to it and you're like, fuck.
Damn it.
Sorry, nerd. Usually I'm the nerd over here like, God damn it, why didn't I think of that? It's like, too simple. My mind doesn't work that way.
How did you talk me through how you ended up in this industry? What's your journey? What's your journey to right now?
Oh boy. How much time do you got?
As much time as you need.
So I got in this industry completely accidentally. It was the pursuit of love of other things. First, it was my love of Japanese. I started martial arts when I was 13, and I needed to learn a foreign language for my high school. And being born and raised in California, the Spanish professor I had at the moment, teacher, said, well, you need to be able to roll your R's. I can't roll my R's. So I immediately just gave up. But in karate, I had to know a certain amount of Japanese to get my next belt. And I'm going, this makes sense. Like, it's mathematical. I get it. And it doesn't have these roll and R's. Like, the pronunciation's super easy in my mind. Like, I've got this. And so I just dumped my full, energy into learning Japanese. And then someone's like, well, video games come out of Japan. And some of the games that are currently not available in America are available in Japan. And a lot of those games, I just wanted them because I couldn't have them in hindsight.
But that's human condition.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I need to get my Japanese good enough that I can play a video game. And I had the opportunity once I got into Oregon State to travel abroad and study abroad at Waseda University, which is one of the top universities in Japan. And I feel super embarrassed to say this because Oregon State is not one of the top universities in America. It's great, don't get me wrong. I love it. I'm super proud of it. But also it's not Stanford. And that's what Waseda is to the Japanese. So you get into it very easily and you haven't paid the price in Japan, but everyone then respects you in a unique way because you were there. And you have to kind of decide, do I tell them the truth or do I just let it roll off the cuff and be like, yeah, think of me that way.
Do they have a joint program where the Japanese come to Oregon State? And did they realize
no one comes here? I mean, that's the thing is like in Oregon, no one from Waseda comes here because they have opportunities to go. And here's the thing you have to recognize. The kids that go to Waseda have a different perspective on the world. Their parents are foreign embassy, they are, international business, whatever.
1%.
They are the 0.5%, really of Japan. And so they go to places where it makes sense to them, that they want to go play, that they want to go learn, that they want to go grow. You get 2 people from Waseda a year who are like, Oregon sounds cool because of engineering or agriculture. So from there, did a little stint bar backing in Japan. I can not even really call it that because I wasn't allowed to be seen. No one wants a big white guy behind a prestigious bar in Tokyo. So did that, then went to Norway.
Which bar?
I can't say.
Okay.
1, because I really don't remember the name.
Oh.
And 2, it was just like, we need a big guy to stock boxes. And I was like, okay. But one thing will always stick with me. I went into the bar later, and the meticulousness that they put into making cocktails. I had no idea what they were doing. But I learned through my language that they cared about every ingredient, and they cared about every action. And I thought that was really, really cool. And then there's this idea in Japan where you take everything to the nerdiest of nerdy levels. You keep just thinking about it. You keep trying new things. You keep plowing away until you reach your pinnacle. And then you seek to pass that pinnacle on to someone else. so that they can reach a higher pinnacle than you. I fell in love with that idea. And so then going to Norway and seeing truly college culture, I mean, it didn't make sense to me until the first Thor movie was released, and he takes the coffee cup and he's like, I like this beverage, and he smashes on the ground, because that's what club life is like in southern Norway. You're done with your beer, you smash it on the ground. And so you're walking on literally 6 inches of glass by the end of the night. Not even joking. And that's how certain pubs in Norway are. And as a college kid, you go there for that energy, that feeling of it. Come back to
hard-soled shoes are important then.
You tell every girl who's from America who's going out, wear closed-toed heels.
Yeah.
Do not wear something nice. Coming back to America, graduated college, became an accountant in a soy sauce factory in Salem, Oregon, and only got it because I speak Japanese. And desk job, I hated it. My girlfriend I was dating at the time owned a restaurant. She was the head chef in Corvallis, Oregon. And we became engaged. And what I would do after I was done with my day job, I'd come and I'd wash dishes. Or I'd come and I'd just help in whatever way I could. And it started with just washing dishes because that was the one thing I knew I could do. And then from there, it was like food running or like just hanging out and talking to patrons and being like, hi, I'm Robbie. I'm the owner's boyfriend. Which in the beginning felt awkward, but eventually you kind of just got a rapport and you became the maitre d' of sorts. Then from there, I jumped in the kitchen and I loved cooking. But I couldn't take this time lapse from when you create something to when you get this feeling of satisfaction that you get from someone eating this dish you created and them telling you that it was good. I had to get that from a server, which I couldn't trust. They'd lie to you. They'd just tell you whatever they wanted you to hear at the moment, or they're busy. Many different reasons why. So from there, I started serving, and from there started bartending. And bartending is where I found, like, oh, I get everything. I can create things. I'm creative. I'm cooking. I'm distilling. I'm doing all this fun stuff. But I'm also serving a guest and getting a reaction from them and making their day a little bit better. And I love listening to people. I love learning their stories. And I love being the massive nerd I am and providing like feedback of different philosophies or different ideas that might provide something new to their life. And here I am today. That relationship did not work out, as most relationships when you're 22 with a 42-year-old don't work out.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Moved to Portland, and it's been a roller coaster since then. Definitely didn't know what I was doing, but I thought I did. So I got into some pretty nice places like Cask and had no idea what I was doing and got fired. Got into 23 Hoyt, almost got fired, but quit first. And then started selling life insurance. That was horrible. I don't recommend it for anyone unless you really love sales. And
or
then,
you want to be evil.
It's not even evil. It's just the one I worked for was one of those like pyramid scheme of a company. And so it's about the sales. And so the people that succeed in that style of environment are people who just like, they get off on like the next sale. And they're not thinking about how many times they failed. They're just thinking about, I'm going to get the next sale. I'm the next one I'm going to make work. Well, I'm the next one I'm going to make work. And they get off on that. And I worked with a couple people like that. And I was like, wow, you just are fundamentally different from me.
Yeah.
And so from there, I went to the Nines. And the Nines was like this place of healing. And met this person that I follow around quite a bit nowadays, who's the reason I'm here in this hotel, because he started aquaponics in the basement. We had beehives on our rooftop. We had gardens up there. We did whole animal butchery. We had a steak tasting menu where we had, steak from grass-fed versus corn-fed versus grain-finished. And you could taste the difference. And that was a huge part of like what we were saying to our guests was we are what we eat. And so it was understanding that entire, literally as terroir, right? And then from there opened up my bar called Botanist, which was this idea that we bartenders will spend whatever we need to spend on liquors on our back bar, but we'll spend nothing on the ingredients that go into our cocktails. And we get angry when our honey syrup costs more than 10 cents an ounce. So I flipped that, and I was using Oregon honey and from a friend of mine, or two friends actually, that had different beekeeperies, apiaries, and was getting different types of honey that had different flavors. I was using high quality sugars, and we used palm syrup because it was the most sustainable sugar on the planet at the time. We were very forward thinking in that direction. And then we started concocting cocktails based on flavor, not on and on our culinary prowess. So we did like beet ketchup. We'd had carrot butter. We did something called treacle, which I'm sure no one in America knows what the hell that is, but everyone in Europe's like, yeah, I put that on my pancakes in the morning. It's basically a lime syrup where you take sugar and you bring it to its second cracking point, which is like 200 and something degrees, and then you throw lime wheels into it, and that changes the molecular structure of it. The cheat code is you get a pressure cooker and you just throw them in and call it a day, because it will reach that temperature without burning. So, but that became like the best lime cordial I've ever made. So that was what it was. And then the pandemic changed everything. We no longer had this little basement speakeasy. We had this rooftop, 8,000 square foot rooftop, like whatever you want to call it. So we changed our service model. We pivoted, I hate that word so much now, to try and find what works in a community that was like trying to figure this shit out. We were in the Pearl. Anyone who had money in the Pearl was leaving because pre-pandemic, it was cool to have an apartment and then to go out and dine every day. And then the pandemic changed that to it's cool to have a house with a yard and an office. So if you had money, you got out and you did what was cool. And and I mean, arguably healthy for you too, don't get me wrong. If you didn't have money, you were stuck. And so that caused several different social problems, especially in your attitude and how you treat other people. But also it changed the environment of how people go out, right? Because again, they're trapped. They don't have the money to do what they used to do. It changed how that was, and people wanted to party. So we got to the early 2021, and I had just gotten done reading an article from Bill Gates saying how pandemics are chronological. They happen every 100 years. And so I got curious as to, well, if cause and effect is real, then what happens after a pandemic? And every single time after pandemic is a roaring 20s, and then followed by some form of economic or even country recession. And so it felt like the roaring 20s. It was just party goers and people who didn't care about craft or quality. They just wanted to socialize. They wanted to bring large groups in. They wanted to eat and party. They wanted to mingle. But we, the hospitality people, became the police. We had to enforce this like distancing rule. We had to enforce masks. We had to enforce all this. And so it changed, I think, our environment and our attitude of how we have to treat our guests. It was no longer just, hey, come on in and let us show you flavor and taste. It was also, no, you can't do that. But no, you can do this, but you can only do it this way. Oh, but you don't, no, don't get close to this person. So it became very like policing people as opposed to facilitating.
Yeah, it's not hospitality anymore.
No.
When you can't have somebody feel like they're in your home, it's a different ball game.
Completely. And so by the end of 2021, we failed, to put it kindly. So left there, my working vacation became a winery / it was the first winery to ever have a full restaurant and full bar. It's called Amaterra, Ama meaning love, Terra meaning earth. Really cool place. But definitely kind of hit a glass ceiling there where it was my working vacation. I didn't really want to have a lot of responsibility, but also I wanted to be creative. And so as I got through that, I started to realize that there has to be another way for hospitality to be healthy for the people who enjoy it, since we have not been good. And so the only thing I can change is myself and my own personal view on those things. So I might as well be that change myself. And so that's when I started developing my cocktails and thinking about how if I create a cocktail that's bottled, but at the same quality or even higher quality of what I can produce at a bar, and I can learn how to ship that around the world, then cannot other bartenders follow that same style and that same form? And so that's kind of where that all came from. And then from there, I got a call from that same manager.
And it's called?
Right now, the brand is just called Cliche Cocktails. The first brand is meant to be a stab at every other RTD that's come on the market. The way that I read the RTD market, and this is by no means a bad thing, it's more just how I look at it. It's a lot of companies with a lot of money going, well, let's create old fashions, let's create lemon drops, let's create these classic cocktails in a bottle. And my argument is if you go at it from that perspective, you're going to create garbage, because those cocktails were created behind a bar and they're best meant to be enjoyed behind a bar.
For those that don't know, RTD is ready to drink.
Thank you. So I did an experiment back at Botanist where I examined water after listening to Zac Efron go or have he has his series on Netflix, which anyone who's listening, like, you really need to watch it. I don't care what you think about Zac Efron. It's a really interesting series. He went and talked to a water somm down in LA, and this water somm basically talked about the minerality, so these little microparticles that are in water that changes the way that you perceive flavor. So again, completely from a textural point of view, it wasn't phenols, but that texture changed how then you perceived so much more. And so I got into a whole phase of like, could I manipulate the water that I put into cocktails to have a certain texture so that it changed my perception? And there's a apple vodka out of Clear Creek Hood River Distillers that's 100% apples distilled into a vodka. And if you just drink the vodka on its own, it just tastes like vodka. But when you add in water that has trace minerals of salt, tiny bit of honey, and specifically malic acid, all of a sudden it becomes the most delicious like appletini you've ever had. It's dry, it's full of flavor, it's easy to drink, but it's a martini. Truly, like clear, frozen, like beautiful. And so that then started me thinking, well, wait a second, what if a bottled cocktail was dilution? It was every ingredient down to the bricks of something were thought of and measured and created to be pulled from a fridge and just drank as is. That would not be a classic cocktail anymore. That would be the next stage. And then we could also think about fermentation. So this one has kombucha in it. But Noma, the guy at the fermentation, they stated that the best kombuchas were when you drank it before it went all the way dry. And they ran into that problem because the way that the yeast and bacteria relationship exists. The bacteria needs air to survive. The yeast does not. So the second you bottle something, the bacteria dies, but the yeast keeps going. So you create alcohol whether you like it or not. And you either have to pasteurize it or you have to like let it go all the way to vinegar. So the idea with this one is, well, it doesn't need to be non-alcoholic. I'll just crash it like you do with port. And so there'll be that residual sweetness left over from the honey that's been fermented with a kombucha mother, but I'm going to get all these cool micro notes. And so technically it's a cliche cocktail. It's a whiskey sour. It's just another one of those things. But I want to start thinking about cocktails in a whole new light of being an amalgamation of the natural energy that is our earth, our environment, and thinking about and also putting investments into the future of growing ingredients. Is it aquaponic? Is it indoor? Is it like what cognac and Hennessy does, like investing in the land and thinking about the future? And then looking at those natural flavors, which just magically work together, and creating a cocktail that works with those magical flavors and crashes it so it stops the fermentation right where you want it.
There are so many places we could go from here. But like what? So when you talk about all of that and like when you look at, I guess, produce in this country being the U.S., what worries you about that? Because it's like there's documentaries out now about like food is killing us. And when you look at like the U.S., like being a Canadian, I see constant things of like the same product, supposed to be the same product in the U.S. we have in Canada. If you look at the ingredient spec,
completely different.
They're different. And because we don't have the FDA, we have the Canadian version of it, and Europe's got their own testing facilities. Does any of that worry you?
Immensely. So I did a deep dive on gut health one day. If you all haven't figured out yet, I'm a nerd of rather crazy amount.
That checks out.
So I did this deep dive on gut health, and so 40% of your gut is what you eat. 60% is what you touch. Your entire mental stability is based on your gut health. And the best that we can tell right now, it's diversity. Diversity is the spice of life. And hence, again, my wife says I'm very cliche. I have a lot of these cliche sayings that mean something to me. But when you think about where food here in Oregon, so Oregon's really special. Oregon has the largest mycelia network in the world, and it's the oldest. It's 1,800 years old, and it spans basically from southern Washington down to northern California. And a mycelia network is a mushroom network. We now know that mushroom networks carry not only the messages between different species of trees and bushes and everything else, they also transport ingredients. So here in Oregon, oak trees are like our captains. They tell this mycelia network where to push ingredients. And that has to do with where, like killing off certain weed groups, they'll deprive that land of nutrients and push it somewhere else where there's a higher density of like bushes like that produce something, because weeds don't make sense to oaks. Weeds take nutrients and don't give anything back. But like say blueberries produce these fruits that cause animals to come and eat the fruits and then diversify that species. But two, those animals bring in their waste. And that waste gets converted by the mycelial network, which then gets converted into nutrients for all of the trees and bushes in that area. So it's a complex relationship. And also mycelial network mushrooms, they breathe oxygen like you and me. So trees, plants produce oxygen, hence why there's that relationship that exists there. We also have some of the strictest laws in the US of what we can do to our earth here. And when you get into gut health, at least from the eating point of view, you realize that all of these things that prevent something from breaking down are possibly a part of the reason why our bodies are having a lot of these issues now of not being able to consume wheat, not being able to consume, cheeses and whatnot. It has to do with where in our gut takes in that ingredient and then decomposes it in a proper way to where we get the nutrients out of it, and then what we don't use is properly recycled. I think here in America, we're doing a really good job of financially branding everything without really thinking about the long-term consequences. And if you think about companies here in the US, we measure things quarterly. Every quarter comes out, and that's where your bonuses are. So financial investment, financial monetary value in your own career is based on what you do every quarter. There's a huge incentive to cheapen everything because that's your bonus. You look at Cognac France, Hennessy, I'm assuming you guys measure time in the sense of your cognacs. So the minimum measurement of your time has to be somewhere between 4 and 6 years probably.
So yeah, it's close actually. Great guess. A short-term plan for Hennessy is like 3 years.
Yeah.
A mid-term is like 10. A long-term plan is a generation.
Yeah.
So it's, and that's why they've invested in living soils and environmental initiatives, because we can't make cognac, like if it gets too warm or the soil gets too eroded or dead, we can't just get grapes from Germany where it might be cooler, or Spain or anywhere else that's a great producing region. We have to do it in cognac. So if we don't save cognac, who will? It becomes the...
And I think it takes... Hennessy's been around for 300 years?
Close. 258.
Having that kind of records and that history, I think generates thought that then goes into, well, it's not about me. I'm just the current takeover of this company, and I'm the current leader or whatever. The next generation will decide the next generation's things. I have to set them up correctly. I can't just make my money here and get out and call it a day, because I'll screw everyone on the end of it all. Whereas you think about America, we're a young country, and most of our companies are young. And so they don't have that kind of foresight. Most of our companies are still based on the first person who started it. Look at who we worship. We worship companies like Microsoft, like Apple, like Tesla. With the exception of Apple, all of those creators are still here and still driving the force of what that is. Apple's coming into a place now where they haven't really created anything new since the death of their quote unquote, that person who started all that visionary. They haven't invested in who the future visionary is because they are so scared to lose what they have. Whereas you go into say like, older car companies, they know exactly what works for them. Chevy still has the number one ranked truck in the world. But they know how to invest. They know how to think about the future. Disney, it took them a while. It took them a long time. And their founder didn't quite set them up for success in this era. A lot of his personal beliefs were pretty counter the current day belief system. But they've hired very well for their creative directors. And so they're still relevant. They're still thinking for the future in that sense. And so to me, it goes back to, as we talked before this whole thing, responsibility. You take that word and you break it apart. You have the ability to respond. So if you don't have the ability to respond to something, then you can totally throw your hands up and be like, not my problem. I literally can't do anything about it. It's not me. But if you do have an ability to respond to something, don't you have a certain amount of responsibility that is equal to how much you can respond to it?
Yeah.
So for me, if I have a brain that can think of these things, then I owe it to myself and the world to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we worry about so many things that we can't affect change in.
Bingo.
It prevents us from thinking about the things that we can affect change in. And that if you can affect change, it's not always the easiest thing.
And it's also, we also, I think, get bogged down by positive or negative, right? Oh, I'm going to do something that's good. Well, of course you want to do something that's good. But good is perspective. It's relevant. I'm sure Disney tried to do things that he thought was good. 40, 50, 60 years later, we're going, that's debatable. I'm sure, to put it out there and say, I'm sure Hitler himself thought he was doing things that were right.
For the German people.
For the German people, for his people that were close to him. History tells a very different story than what he personally thought. So it's not about doing what you think is right. It's change will happen no matter what. It's how do you want to affect the change that is around you, and does it benefit you, or does it benefit the whatever you're into that you care about that's bigger than you, right? For me, I think hospitality is this last frontier of where people can come together and talk. And as we talked before this thing, like there's a wonderful book out there called Drunk that talks about how alcohol shuts down a part of your prefrontal cortex that deals with the personal I. And so I think today in our world, we focus so much on what do I believe in, and depending on what I believe in, I'm just. So, you're a Democrat, you're this. You're a Republican, you're this. I think bars are this place where you can come, and I know we say in bars, don't speak politics, don't speak religion. I think bars are the only safe place to actually have that conversation with someone that you're getting to know. There's a drink to take the edge off, but it's also that drink, that the drug that is alcohol is going to destabilize that part of yourself that goes, I'm important and I need to do what's best for me. And all of a sudden you start thinking about how do we make this work and how do we make this important? And so then you can hear someone with a different point of view and be like, oh, that's cool that you have that perspective. I've never heard of that before. Oh, I'm listening to you now. I can see where I can relate to that. I don't agree on this, but I do agree on this. And it gets us away from these hard, rigid walls that are religion and politics and whatever. And so to me, I think bartenders are the last caretakers of that kind of safe space for people to come together and relate to one another, as opposed to build these barriers between each other.
Yeah, I think you're right there. The facilitators of conversation, I think, is something that is important. I think comedians have a little bit of that as well.
Sure.
They're not maybe they're facilitating the conversation by saying the things that maybe people are thinking, and then bartenders are the ones that have to be there to moderate.
For sure. And the only reason I'd say bartenders are the last frontier, and I think there's many other industries that do it. I think I go back to then gut health. 40% of your gut's based on what you eat. 60% is based on what you touch and who you touch. And again, there is no right answer. There's no one, just keep touching this thing and you're good. It's a multitude of things. It's variety is the spice of life. So interacting with and bumping into and touching people that are outside of your normal bubble is, I think, incredibly important for an environment to grow strong. And that environment that is both your stomach and the outside will keep that variety up. So making sure you're having a space that follows certain rules, like, hey, all are welcome in here. Hey, we're trying to do our hospitality as a best of practice for as many different types of people with different backgrounds and different beliefs as possible. Oh, you don't drink? Sweet, we have a wonderful mocktail menu for you. Oh, you can't eat this? Cool, we have a vegetarian menu. We have a gluten-free option. We have all these other things available for you so that you feel like you can break bread with someone else in this space. I think that's what's important in my mind for bars. And next is going, well, in the climate change that is our world, what's the future of that bar? Is it a space, or can it be virtual? Can we enjoy cocktails in a virtual space together and just connecting over that cocktail? can we enjoy each other via cooking together, although separated apart? How do you do that in that space?
Yeah. So are there any things that run counter to that, or that scare you about our hospitality industry right now? Or not scare, worry.
I mean, I'm scared that we're in a world where it's so easy to blame. And to me, blame has always been a way of shifting your own personal responsibility. Quickly, what I learned a long time ago was if you fear something, it's a part of yourself, right? That's being projected onto someone else. And because it's not you, you're noticing it, and that jumps out at you. And you don't like it, or it scares you. And not liking something is usually, I mean, Star Wars got it right? Like, hate leads to fear, or fear leads to hate, hate leads to all these other things. So vice versa, if you don't like someone, chances are there's a part of them that is a part of you that you're scared to examine, hence why you just don't like them. Today, we're so quick to blame someone else for the faults of their generation, for their people, for their sex, for whatever, that we don't take responsibility ourselves to change what we can change. And when you blame someone, I think that you take that personal responsibility and you let someone else shoulder it. Mm-hmm. And you make someone else be the savior that needs to be, and you don't do anything about yourself. And I think that our business world and how it's come into restaurants, we have so many business structures like HR, like CEOs, like managers and different things that allow us to say, oh, no, you can shoulder my burdens. I'm powerless. I can't do anything. Instead of being like, no, you can do a lot. And when you work in small mom and pop like restaurants, you learn that real quick. Like, hey, if you ain't gonna do it, no one's gonna do it, or you're just gonna burn the owner out because now the owner has to go clean the toilets constantly. So I hope that as big business seems to take over the world more and more constantly, Ian Bremmer had a really cool TED Talk about how the future leader of our world will not be a country, it'll be a company or two. I really hope that people look at where they work and go, if you're happy just shouldering everything on someone else, by all means, just keep doing so. If that's what, and then do what you really care about back at home, by all means. But if you really care about the industry that you work in, really double think about how you can be a part of the trajectory of that industry, of that like concept, right? And I think bars and restaurants are really second, third oldest business in the world that we have. And so really taking control, not in a bad way, but taking control of that narrative and doing what you can to make sure that it grows positively for future generations is important.
That reminds me of a book that I forget the name of right now, but you'll know it if I talk about it. It's a leadership book that was based on the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team. Mm-hmm. And they say, like, that jersey and that number don't belong to you. It belongs to the position and the club. And you just have to embody it while you have it, and think of all the greats that wore that number before you, and think about all the greats that are in the future for it.
Think about like human archetypes, right? We have all these great stories of mythologies of these certain archetypes. Those people that embodied those archetypes weren't good or bad. They just were that archetype. And we remember them because they embodied that archetype to its fullest, both in a positive and a negative way. And there's some power in that, being both, and then managing yourself and understanding, like, I mean, I think we talk about it in philosophy a lot. Like every human is not shallow enough to just be one. No one's completely good. No one's completely bad. That doesn't mean anything. You're going to have traits that certain people at certain times, certain eras view as positive, and certain traits that people view as negative via the time. So learn to live healthy with who you are, and learn that, there are some things that you're going to, quote unquote, need to be part of your own physiology, your own mental aptitude. How do you do that healthily? How do you not hurt and hinder other people by doing that, but at the same time live your own truth, or whatever you want to call it?
I think that's a great point to
Make
get
you
a
a
new
cocktail.
cocktail.
Yeah.
Done. All right. What is this?
This is the Negroni I made for Negroni Week.
That's got a more complex spice than I was expecting to it.
Okay.
What did you do?
That was a kind way of saying that's different.
No, I would just.
So
It's not traditional.
no, tequila base, and then one of the things that, as I'm starting to discover that there's the classic alcohols, right? So we have wine made from grapes. We have beer, something that's fermented from a starch that then gets converted via an enzymatic process into a sugar. And then we have actual sugar that we just distill straight, or ferment and then distill straight. There are other types of alcohol, other wines out there that are made via the definition that wine is from fruit, but it's not. So blueberry wine is a thing now. And Oregon, we actually have a decent amount of it. It's super interesting. This hopefully someday will become that. But what it is now is we took blueberries and we infused them in grain neutral alcohol, watered it down, and then fermented that into a vinegar.
Okay.
So blueberry vinegar, tequila, Campari, sweet vermouth, and then a touch of salt that is lacto-fermented blueberries.
Yeah. I get a little of the blueberry now that you're saying it. I would not have picked that out beforehand.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
And that begs the question on cocktails, like, when is it no longer a Negroni? Like, you have sweet vermouth in there, you have Campari, so yeah, you're still in a solid base. But like, you talk about the whiskey sour earlier, and it's like, okay, well, it's like, what is that? And I think it's like so many times we can look at classics, and it's like, is it the coming together of 3, 4, 5 ingredients, or is it that flavor profile that makes it that classic?
And I think that is that's a good question in the sense, like, is this a Negroni? You could argue either way. You could pick a side and be like, no, this is not a Negroni. Mm-hmm. Negronis are bitter, not acidic. And this has, we go back to those like base flavors, right? It has acidity, it has bitter, it has salt, it has sweetness. It has a lot of these different notes that allow it to be what it is. And hence why, like with cliche cocktails, that I really want to challenge, what is a cocktail even? And at what point does a cocktail just become the next alcoholic drink, the next alcoholic beverage? And can that beverage do something? I mean, as we talked about earlier, like, why the hell is Benedictine still around? Why is Chartreuse still around? Why is sherry still around? Like, in a not in its shitty nature for the barrels that are needed for the Scotch producers of the world, but for the fact that these are ingredients that people have put their entire countries at work to create, mm-hmm. or their entire monastery or their entire livelihood to create. And time is the cruelest of all mistresses, and eventually they will be forgotten. But I feel like bartenders have this power to combine things from different cultures, from different places and time and space, and get them across to people without being, I mean, I'll say this and now this will reverse everything, without being canceled. I mean, how many, here in Portland, we went through a phase where if you were a white girl doing a taco truck, you failed. Because, and that happened, there's a very specific case of that, because she stole the recipe from a family down in Mexico and did it. And that story got out, and no one wanted to go to her anymore. Bartenders do that exact same thing. We go to these different cultures, we explore via brands taking us there and showing us these things, we get inspired, and then we steal it, and then we put it into our creations. But yet people take those as cocktails and try them. At the same time, I throw on a random whatever cognac on the back bar, whatever random tequila, whatever random with a brand that no one knows, and no one's going to try that unless I work really hard to sell them on that. But you put a cocktail on the menu and you say the flavors that it's going to have, and pretty much anyone will try it. And so cocktails end up being this real like magic keyword that you say to someone and they'll just try it. They'll throw caution to the wind and be like, fuck it, I'll give it a try. And so I feel like cocktails are a way that you can preserve certain historical, palatial things and throw money at it and dump that money into where it's coming from so that they can use that money then to keep that infrastructure alive. Same way that cognac has done it, right? Same way that Hennessy has done it. In the sense that, okay, I want to support this one person because they're doing an amazing fucking job. Or maybe it's this group of people in this area. I'm going to use their ingredient. Because business has shown me and taught me that I need to outsource these things. I can't do everything myself. But it makes more sense to just find the person who does it well and make it make business and financial sense for them so that they can build up their own industry, their own people, their own way of life. But I just get to reap the rewards from that.
Yeah.
That is like common day business practice. The kicker and the hard one is like you look at, say, like the bourbon world. The bourbon world is split right now because we're running out of American oak. And they've been defined via like these old American laws of saying that, well, you have to be this. You have to use new American oak. Yeah. You can't use used barrels. Well, why was that put in there? It wasn't because bourbon makers were like, oh, I think new American oak is the only way to make the best bourbon American whiskey. No, it was put in by the U.S. government going, well, we need to take care of the lumber industry. Well, then that backfired. You need to find how you can invest in the sustainability of a certain product and understanding the time, understanding how long it takes for it to be generated, and then understanding what your take on that is. And I think when bartenders are able to bottle something that can then be aged, that can then be traded, that can have its own kind of life, it allows us to take on that mantle, that role of going, no, we want to support this cognac producer. No, we want to support this tequila maker because they get it. As opposed to this person over here, or this company over here. And so it allows us to be very specific on our choices of who we want to support, not just for flavor, but also for longevity of our own brands, their brands, and the whole ecosystem that is this world of cocktail and hospitality.
Yeah. Yeah. Supporting those that you think are doing it right. And I think some of that has to come down to transparency.
100% has to be.
And that people need to, it's like you need to take people need to give a shit.
Well, okay.
They need to give a shit to look into it, because if you don't look into it, then you're just following marketing. Like I saw this meme, and it's amazing that I think it was brought up by The Onion, and it said 70% of celebrities don't realize they own a tequila.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it's of course a joke on the industry of that there are so many celebrity tequilas right now, and tequila is the new hot spirit, but it's also, no, it's not easy to produce. I'm not taking that away from it, but it's like all the aging. If you were to open a whiskey or a cognac, you need, like, there's a joke in cognac that to make great cognac, you need a grandfather that made great cognac and a father that made great cognac, and then you can make great cognac, because you need a warehouse full of like 30-year-old stuff to make a decent XO and all the way down. Whereas tequila, all the aging is done by the farmers for you ahead of time in the growth of the agave, and you only really need to wait a couple years to even get an extra añejo, and so you're in a really good place. So
I'm so happy and serendipitous that you brought that up. The one that really blew my mind as to how you grow a brand was Fortaleza. Fortaleza, I don't think they have it anymore. I hope they start back up again. Had this bartender. They spent zero money on marketing. Zero. Was never going to have a commercial, never was in a page on a book, never. What they did is they said, hey, if you're a bartender and you come down to Mexico and you let us know, we'll put you up. Which then morphed into these like Day of the Dead or like special incursions where a bunch of bartenders would sign up, they'd go, and the first thing that you did when you got down there you went to their friend's distillery. You went to Arete, and you learned about this historic of how this has been produced for 100, 200 years. And then the next day you went to another Don Fulano who makes Fuente Seca, who makes Chimarron, a bunch of different brands of tequila, Tears of Lorana. And you see how they do it. Very sciencey, very nerdy, very different. And then you go and drink Fortaleza, and you go, this is really good. But the reason he takes you to them is not because they are better or worse or whatever. He takes you to them because they're authentic and they're real and they embody a certain spirit that he believes is the right way to be in Tequila Mexico. And the reason for that is right now in Mexico, the biggest thing that is happening is you have this businessification of tequila. And so you have these tools like a diffuser, which if you don't know what that is, it's this like football field size machine that converts the starches of the agave into fermentable sugars and ferments it via hydrofluoric acid. So the way it was described to me is it's like taking a lime and instead of like juicing it by hand to just get the fresh juices in the oil, or even like a machine to just get the juices and the pith, you're throwing the whole thing into a blender. Well, the juice you get out is going to taste like crap because it's everything. And then you have to chemically adulterate it in order to get what you want it to taste like. That is so many new tequilas right now. And the worst thing is it's so hard to figure out who's doing it and who's not because people will just buy other people's tequila make and call it their own now. And so there's a lot of trading that happens behind the distillery doors that no one sees and no one knows how to deal with. And so hence why, Tequila Advocate has like the additive free thing. That's changed a lot of things and it's putting it in a positive direction. But you look really into a lot of these celebrity tequilas, a lot of them are diffuser products. So it's taking something and getting 100% of the yield, fermenting it very quickly, and then aging it and doing all these things, but also knowing you're going to get like one of the flavors that you can taste when you taste a diffuser is eucalyptus. You're going to get these off flavors that don't necessarily belong in that tequila, and you're going to have to cover them up in certain ways. That's an incredibly cheap way to make something. And you think there's a very expensive bottle of tequila out there that has a very beautiful bottle, and you see it on the back bar everywhere and whatnot, and it's like $90 to $500 a bottle, and it's diffuser made. So they're making this in the cheapest way possible and then selling it for the absolute maximum. And there's a part of me and my personal who I am that has massive issues with that. There is no investment into the future. It's just how do I turn as much money as possible? And without me knowing the story of what that money then is going into, what other industry they're trying to grow other than their own personal banking account, I don't want to use them. I don't want to carry them. I don't want to support them. I don't want to care about them because they're not caring about anyone else that I care about either.
Its marketing has gotten more and more sophisticated over the years. Tell me what you think about this, because one of the things I've been thinking about tequila a lot because it's the fastest growing major spirit. And one of the things I came up with was, how did it get there? Well, it's really easy to understand in that they have a statement that means you don't need to worry. We know you need to worry because the statement 100% agave does not necessarily mean it doesn't have additives.
No.
But to most people, 100% agave just means that's a great tequila. And so they have, in one statement, made the entire category really easy to understand because nobody needs to understand it now. They know that if it says that, it's good.
So have you ever, I don't know what the official title for this is. I'm sure there is. I call it idiot marketing. So if you look on a bottle of Tito's, it says gluten-free vodka. Well, to the experts like you and me, every fucking bottle on that back bar is gluten-free. We know that the gluten molecule can't transfer through a still. But to everyone else who doesn't know that much, this causes a cascade of questions to fall into your mind that you don't have answers for. Wait, are all spirits not all gluten-free? Well, shit, which ones are gluten-free and which ones are not? Well, how do I know? Well, this one states that it is, so I'm just going to go with this one. And I have so many friends who have issues with celiac and gluten-free things. I should be smart too. I don't know if it affects me. So it causes a mass amount of fear, very low-level fear, very like existential crisis of yourself. But these questions that are linked to fear to cascade through your mind. But this one bottle satiates all of those questions. So I'm just going to trust it. 100% agave. Same thing. What does it mean? 50 years ago it meant something, but today it means nothing.
Did you ever watch Mad Men?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a point, I think really early on, probably first or second season, where the advertising agency that Don Draper works at is working with a tobacco company.
Mm-hmm.
And he just says, don't worry about saying tobacco is bad. Everybody knows that. Let's just focus on something that you're different. It's like, tell me how you make your cigarette. And I forget what he focuses in on, but he focuses on one thing and he goes, oh, you're rolled this way, or your filter paper is this, or your filter is that. And it's like, that's all we need to say. Like such and such tobacco company, like the one with the filter.
Yeah.
And it's just like, they all have filters. But they were the one that said it, so they own it. And full disclosure, I have gotten Hennessy placed at bars by it being gluten-free because it's made from grapes.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
People walked in, I didn't bring it up, but somebody was like, oh, I can't participate in this tasting. A bar manager at a bar that will not be named said, oh, I can't participate. I'm celiac. I went, okay. I'm made from grapes. I'm not a whiskey. And they got so happy. And they're like, I can drink this brown spirit. This is amazing. So I didn't go into, you could distill pure gluten and you wouldn't get gluten.
Well, because at the same time, you can't attack that person. You can't say you're a fucking idiot. You haven't researched your own issues, your own disease,
There's too much out there to know.
Yeah, which is pure and true. You simply made this safe for them. My friend's father was talking to someone this was 70 years ago, trying to sell their homes. And back then you had to take out an advertisement in the paper. And so he's like, I can't get these to sell. What am I going to do? And so he looked at it and goes, tell them that it has, I forget if it was wall-to-wall ceilings or wall-to-wall flooring. I think he said wall-to-wall flooring. And Perfect. They sold the next day.
Perfect. Wall-to-wall flooring.
But
there's some house out there without a floor that goes all the way to the wall.
But that's the thing is all of a sudden it makes you question, wait a second, are there homes? Well, how do I know which homes don't have wall-to-wall flooring? Well, this one says it has wall-to-wall flooring, so I know that they have, at least they have wall-to-wall flooring. And I don't have to worry about it being hidden somewhere else.
That's genius. I like that a lot.
But I like to give credit to him for being the first person to ever come up with that level of idiocracy like marketing. But I studied business in college, and the two things that I've realized about business and marketing is failed engineers made business and failed psychologists made marketing. Maybe not failed, but people who just went, this is not for me. And failure equates to learning, right? And so they failed and they went, but I'll just take these core concepts I've learned and transform it into this. Because they're very much business has cogs, right? It has these things that move, these levers, these gears that, and marketing, it's all about how do you appeal to the human psyche?
How do people feel?
How do people feel? So I mean, there's a positive and negative to both of those things, right? You can create businesses that are healthy. You can create marketing that is healthy and smart. I go back to like, are you trying to mimic a machine such as like a chainsaw? Or are you trying to generate the machine that is like a forest, something that's built naturally over 1,000 years and will continue to live on for thousands of years? Which gears and mechanisms are you trying to copy in your business? And I think if research has taught us anything, it's that we are not nearly as free and as independent as we like to think we are. We very much are a product of our environment. And we very much are a product of what the cogs and the gears and the mechanisms around us make us be. Because we want to do a good job. We want to get paid. And we want to have all the things that the marketing world tells us to have. Okay,
well, speaking of a product of your environment, we're in Portland, Oregon. if I were here, if I'd never been here before, and I were coming in for a weekend, what should I do? Where should I eat? Where should I drink?
Oh boy.
What should I do?
We have lost so many of what was cool pre-pandemic, but there's still a couple gems that have really done an amazing job weathering it. Drinking, I mean, God, Scotch Lodge, Rum Club, Midnight Society is an old bartender that worked at Botanist, a friend of mine. Tanise, I'm sure you know. He's the most handsome human being that will ever walk this planet, but an amazing cocktail artisan. Let's see what else. There's so many other bars that I have not done the proper due diligence of going and visiting. If you like wine, Divisions on Wine or Wine on Division is amazing. Will does such a good job of like teaching you about new wine and what's going on flavor wise. Plus it's an entire bottle shop. His wife makes the best key lime pie I've ever had in my life.
I love key lime pie. Is like the one dessert I'll eat all of it. Every other dessert, I want one bite to like see the mastery. But
Yeah.
I don't have any sort of sweet tooth. I don't care.
Seeing a place like Wines on Division gives me hope for having a restaurant with my wife, because it's like that's how you do it right. Because she's in the kitchen and she just does pastry, she does dessert, she does key lime pie, she does creme brulee, she does cheesecake, and fuck, her cheesecake's amazing. She does stuff like that, and then she brings in different charcuteries and cheeses. She's very into cheese, but that's where she focuses her attention on.
Mm-hmm.
And his is wine and hospitality up front. She comes out, she says hi, she does things, but her domain's back there. I see them both at the gym. They both go and travel together. That's
Amazing.
a healthy relationship and a healthy restaurant.
Yeah.
And it allows them both to shine with who they are. Restaurants, Canard. I'm not sure if you've been, but Le Pigeon is right next door. So Gabriel Rucker is he's two James Beard Award winning chef. He's a chef there. Le Pigeon's like one of the first tasting menus here in Portland, and it's stuck around. Canard is his diner. It's how he views like a diner should be. So very playful, just gluttonous, hedonistic love of food. It's fun if you want to gain 10 pounds by eating for the next like 2 hours and then have a great bottle of wine and cocktails. Nice. G-Love is like the future of restaurants in my mind. The owner, him and his wife have a farm out in Salem, Oregon. And so a lot of his produce he gets from his own farm and sells it through the restaurant. And one, he controls the quality of it, and two, the consistency, and then makes money on both sides. To me, that's controlling your entire supply chain in what you care about, right? So great dishes, great restaurant, great cocktails, great wine list. Really amazing. There's an awesome mom and pop sushi shop out in Selwood, which Selwood is a little region that's largely untouched by kind of all the things that have happened here in Portland. You can park your car and just walk around. It's super cute. Tons of antique shops to go shopping in. But they have a place called Kaide, which is a Japanese sushi restaurant. And it's a husband and wife. And that's it. Reservation, 2 people only, because they're open 6 days a week, and that's all that they can handle, the husband and wife team. And so that's the way they've set it up. And so it's, to me, I look at that and I'm like, oh, another example of how a husband and wife can like set up what they do and what they love.
They can only work 2 days a week together before they.
No, I mean they work 6 days a week together.
6 days, sorry.
But they've set the parameters of, nope, this is what we can handle, and this is what we can do, and hold ourselves to this high standard. And that's it. There's an amazing pâtissier up in North Williams called Jinju. It's a couple, I think they're from Las Vegas, or they're both Korean. But best pastries I've ever had. It's the best croissant I've ever had by like a long shot. I know those are like fighting words to like anybody who loves croissants, especially you. Yeah. But like they're just an amazing couple. They moved here to have a life away from the hustle and bustle that is Las Vegas food scene. And they're both just amazing like rock stars when it comes to like creating these amazing desserts and pastries. They're real cool people. I highly recommend going there.
So I learned to make a croissant near the end of the pandemic when you could go do stuff. We did. I did a cooking class at a friend's bakery, shout out La Dolce, and she had a croissant class. And no wonder I like that pastry. It's just folded dough with butter, with layers of butter in between. I was like, that's it. It's the technique of folding it, so you eventually get to the classic shape. But it's just butter between really thin layers. I'm like, genius.
Want to know how to make a Damascus knife? Want to know how to make a croissant?
Yeah.
It's the same process.
Folding.
Folding. It's just different
Just
materials.
no butter. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you still have to use something that binds things together in steel as well.
Amazing. So what's next for you?
I'm really excited to be here at the Heathman. One, the company that has recently purchased this, I mean, Heathman is a 100-year-old hotel. It's one of the oldest properties in Portland. And when you have people come in here, we've been open for 3 months, a month since I came on. People are so happy and proud that we're open again. The company that bought it they're very invested in being in Portland. And so I feel like maybe my name, maybe who I am can bring some people back downtown because we've lost a lot of that foot traffic down here. And I'm not gonna, the media took what happened to Portland and ran with it. And it developed a life of its own. It's not nearly as dangerous as people like to make it out to be. It's not nearly as degraded as people like to make it out to be. But again,
Specifically, you're talking about riots and like
the riots was contained
small,
to 3 blocks,
takeover.
4 blocks. Yeah. I mean, it was blown out of proportion. At the same time, what sells media-wise? Negativity. So here's this thing that was happening in Portland, Oregon that was negative, especially with all the cool things that happened to. And everyone loves a downfall story. Everyone loves a downfall, and everyone loves a,
it's a hero's journey.
Yeah. So the media took off with it, and that's what sold for them. That's how they made money, and that's how they kept people employed during the pandemic. And at the same time, it hurt. It hurt Portland, that news that got blown out of proportion. It hurts the people that live and work here. It hurt the hospitality industry. It hurt travel. It hurt so many things. So the idea of I had to get away from it because of Botanist and because of that failure, and I had to go recover for a year and a half outside of it. Now to come back and be a part of it and be ready to pick up the fight feels really good.
Feels great.
At the same time, my goal with like my cocktails is I want to develop a bar that has a base license of a distillery. That's fairly inexpensive here in Oregon. And I want to develop that bar where bartenders are their own entrepreneurs. They're coming on. There's a certain, I need employees. You've got to commit to me for 1-2 years. I will teach you fermentation. I will teach you aging. I will teach you all kinds of the new sciences because at the end of the day, as a distillery license, I have access to rotovaps. I have access to sonic wands. I have access to technology that America will not let behind a normal bar. If you want to learn how to play with these things, you can come and be my employee for a while. I'll pay you. You'll learn. And at the end of whatever time period I define it at the end of, because I need that buy-in, I need that commitment, you can then go and launch your own brand, which can be sold through the bottle shop, because here in Oregon, every distillery has up to 5 tasting rooms they can open, and those tasting rooms can double as bottle shops. So putting one in the PDX airport, putting one in a hotel, putting one in different little bars around the state, that you can come in and try these cocktails and see how cool they are, but also then be excited because you can just take them home and pour them out of your fridge like you would a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to do next.
So reimagining bars.
Reimagining bars to where, so one of the things that I'll fully disclose, I took my first edible during the pandemic. I'd never explored weed as a drug before. It terrified the shit out of me.
Neither have I.
I took an edible and because I won't smoke. My lungs are too important to me. Took an edible and immediately loved it. I was so creative. I was thinking in such a weird way, and I was going, this is definitely habit forming. I need to be very careful with this. And so I made it so that I would go running whenever I took an edible, or I'd go work out. My body was more relaxed. I dealt with my lower back issues and my knee problems a lot better, to the point where they healed in a much better way. But it got me also the blood flowing, and I thought much more focused. And one of the things I realized is I had to shut down Botanist several times during the pandemic years, not just because of the pandemic. Once I shut down because it was 116 degrees and we are a patio bar. I closed down because it was frozen and no one could get to work. I closed down because I couldn't have enough staff. There were other reasons outside the pandemic. And what if I look at the pandemic and all these reasons as just climate change? When you close a business's doors for a day, you lose 10 grand. There isn't a business in this world today that can survive losing 10 grand randomly a day. So the next bar needs to be able to withstand closing the doors for a day, for a week.
Mm-hmm.
What does that bar look like? How do you pay people? How do you have employees? How do you continue to function? How do you run? It needs to be more than just a place for people to gather. It needs to be an idea. It needs to be an education center. It needs to be a community hub where no matter what, you're there to support the community. And you can do that via alcohol. I took the idea from Dune, the spice shall flow, and this is just my spice that I know. At the same time, back to our previous conversations, like it can support so many different peoples around the world by buying ingredients from them, buying alcohol from them. And weirdly enough, when I started reaching out to international players in the world of alcohol, most of them wouldn't deal with me. They were like, that's a $2 to $3 million upgrade to our bottling line. We don't deal in totes. We deal in bottles of various sizes that the U.S. market allows. But every local distiller was like, yeah, we'd love to help you. We'll give you a 52-gallon tote of gin.
There's a lot. It's a lot harder to. In some cases, the laws are against them to shipping those totes.
100%.
Yeah.
At the same time, I mean, you look at like MGP. MGP can totally do it. I could build this entire bar idea just on MGP, MPG, whatever, the distillery out in Indiana. That's not what I want to do. I want to support other people who are trying to give it a go in this world. And ideally, I'd like to become large enough and in enough different countries that I can treat Hennessy as my local backyard purveyor. Or, go have one up in Scotland where I can go to different Scotch distilleries and have them as that backyard distillery that I can just go and fill up a 52-gallon tote of and use that to make my cocktails. And that way I can be transparent. I can be authentic about who I'm using and be proud of it and say, no, I'm using Hennessy Cognac because I believe in these things as my base alcohol in here. And I'm using this wine. I'm using this fermentation. I'm using this farmer's pears to make the juice for this because they're doing cool things. And like, scan this QR code on the back of this cocktail and let me show you about all these cool things and have almost like a little mini documentary.
You're like the
so
gateway.
Cool. Yeah, this is the gateway drug to finding out about how cool the world we live in really is. So drink this cocktail, sit at home, Skype, with your friends because you can't see them. Maybe eventually we all have VR goggles and you're in a bar where you're VR connected to everyone and you're talking about this cocktail, but you're also watching a video about.
You're in an empty bar, but it looks full around you.
Bingo.
All the people.
So just trying to think about, okay, how does the bar of the future operate no matter what? When we can get together at a bar space, because obviously that's healthier for us, let's do it. But when you can't, what's the fallback? How do we still employ people? How do we still make people's payments? Everyone can put food on the table. Everyone can pay their mortgage, their rent, whatever. And how do we create an environment where that's still feasible, even though we're going to have hot summers where things don't function? I mean, think about where Spain and Italy is at right now. They don't have air conditioning. They have old houses, but that was not a problem. Now it's getting to be a problem. It's not going to be safe to go outside for a few days. Yeah. What does that do to the local businesses? Winters, when it's so cold and the state's not set up. We have laws here where we cannot salt certain roads because the runoff of that salt will then damage the rivers where salmon swim up.
When it gets really cold, you don't want to salt anyway.
Yeah.
You want gravel or like sand because it gets into the ice and makes it grippy because you can't get rid of it. When it gets too cold, the salt just melts the ice and then it refreezes instantly.
Yep.
So, a little knowledge from the frozen north.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. But, so where can people find you?
I'm at the Heathman Bar, which is called The Tavern, Tuesday through Saturday. And then social media, conscious bartender, or conscious_bartender. I think that's what it is. And just find me any other way.
And we'll see the rise of cliche cocktails.
I hope I can change that brand out very quickly. I just need a proper name.
Done. Well, cheers. Thanks for sitting with me. Always a good talk and a pleasure.
Same.
Cheers.